Wake up, San Francisco. Oh, wait. Wrong introduction.
That's a great way to start.
Take two.
At least my name is not Lori Loughlin. And that's another reason why I won't have kids, because I would never lie to get them into school. Get into school on your own. Wow, this is starting off great, isn't it?
I don't even know who you are.
All right.
Man.
Welcome to Discussions with the Devil, the podcast. My name is Mouthy. I am one of the originators of this podcast, along with that salty devil. And again, with us, we have our good friend Apeshit. And
Here.
yes, that name will stick. And I will make sure it sticks.
That's too late.
You're too late. The damage is done.
Just to kind of, stay on track, for the viewers out there, listening and watching or what have you. This podcast, the goal is to basically find topics that people in general might not talk about because they would be concerned about having too much of a different opinion than those they're conversing with. One of the reasons that, we decided to call it, Discussions with the Devil is, I think in general, in any circle, in any, social circle, the devil might be sort of a taboo subject. And I think even though I don't know if the subjects that we will choose will end up, falling into that realm of taboo, I think that, it allows us to discuss things that might be a little scratchy, as I like to call it. And it would tend to irritate some people, and they wouldn't be able to talk about it because their opinions are too different. But I feel like with the three of us, and hopefully, in the future, as we have people on, those people that we have as guest speakers on the podcast would be able to properly converse and have a more thorough exchange of ideas.
Yep. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Ironically, that kind of sums up why my avatar, or my moniker, so to speak, is that salty devil. Salty one because life sucks, and you just kind of got to roll with it.
You get salty because I refer to you as the not so popular version of Mike the Situation Sorrentino.
I love you too.
And I just realized you're editing this video, so that may or may not end up on YouTube. But if it ends up on YouTube, it will never be off the internet.
Oh, that's fine. But yeah, like a lot, at least from my standpoint, I want us to be able to talk about these things, and a lot of the things that I've dealt with in my life, and I know I keep using the word things, but I'm having a hard time wording this morning. There's a lot of demons that have been like scratching underneath the surface, over my life, and it just seemed more right to embrace it than to try to keep repressing it. Yeah. So while we're here, I'm gonna be as transparent as I can be, and just try to let you guys know how I feel, and at the same time, try to keep it in a manner where it's not going to cause confrontation.
Yeah.
Which, based on our exchanges and everything, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, I think as long as we keep it in a space where it's not, there's no risk of alienating any of the members of the conversation or any of the participants of the conversation. I think as long as we work to not alienate somebody, then it'll be fine, because of the fact that I think the times where people get alienated, the people that they get alienated by, those people had an absolute intention of alienating them. And I feel like, as long as we don't have the intention of alienating each other, I think it'll work out absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And also, we keep it civil. So,
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And that helps.
But I mean, let's be serious about it. If we're going to gang up on anybody, it's going to be you apeshit. So, I mean, just because it's kind of easy.
Well, they call me apeshit for a reason, For
Oh,
two reasons.
trust me. You can't get scrappy with me. I'll get scrappy with you, and I'll hit you in the back of the knees, and you'll go down.
I don't know.
Oh, so now we're picking a fight on the recording. Cool.
Oops.
Whatever works.
Okay.
Just to kind of, keep this moving along. And I will say that there are probably, just because I am not as informed on certain things, there probably won't be certain things that we talk about on here. Or if we do, it'll be very minimal. And you guys can back me up on this. I think the two subjects that cause the most controversy are religion and politics. And I think the approach that we have, as far as working toward trying to understand the human condition, as I have stated before, I think if we approach it from that perspective, I don't think that discussing any topic will be a source of contention. Do you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's fair.
Yep, I mean, really the way I see it, I mean, as long as, we try to keep it civil, and if it starts to fall out of that, we keep each other in check.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we're here. We're here to have an intellectual conversation, and go from there. If we're right, we're right. If we're wrong, we're wrong. It's not really the point. We're talking.
Yeah.
So.
And I think as far as exchanging ideas, I don't necessarily think that any of us will be wrong. I think it's just a matter of being willing to expand your understanding. Because I think if you're willing to expand your understanding, you don't always have to be classified as right or wrong, because somebody else that you're talking to may have a little bit more knowledge than you. So while the extent of your knowledge stops at one point, somebody else can help elevate your understanding, as long as you're open to allowing them to help you, understand further.
Here.
Yep. I concur with that. Yeah, I guess kind of what I was saying is, right or wrong, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So we're here to kind of like, I guess, kind of feed into each other, so to speak. Be like, here's my piece of knowledge, and then you do the same, and we just kind of cycle it through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think maybe just as I don't know, what do you call it? I forget what we call it. I guess I'm at a loss for words too. But we're not the news. We're just three talking heads with three different perspectives, and we're just sharing them.
I have the biggest head, or at least that's what my friends tell me. I have a gigantic dome.
Okay, good. So yeah, you can be our foundation, and go from there.
I am Zordon, motherfucker.
There is no Zordon, only Zool.
Zordon would kick Zool's ass. And let's not bring up, Ghostbusters.
Copyright.
I was actually referencing, Family Guy TM.
But isn't Zool from one of the Ghostbusters movies?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I was referring to the whole scene from Family Guy where Peter's in the refrigerator.
Oh, see, I haven't seen. I like Family Guy. I just have not, seen a lot of episodes. But moving along.
Yes. Let's do that before we go on another tangent.
Hurry.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to discuss, as far as trying to understand people better, and I want to allow Ethan, I want to allow Apeshit to take the reins on this one, just because of his knowledge of it. I read an article and saw a couple of videos recently about Bernie Sanders, who came into the political sphere. I mean, I know he is, I think, a senator from Vermont, but he really came to prominence back in 2016 when he was in the running for the Democratic Party. And a lot of people gravitated toward him. Essentially, there was some corruption that happened, and he got pushed out in favor of Hillary Clinton. And I think a lot of people felt slighted, or a lot of his base felt slighted, because there were so many ideas that he had that were so, such a contrast to what the Democrats were about, because Bernie considers himself an independent. I think he had such a stark contrast to what the Democrats were about that people gravitated toward him. But when he had to admit defeat, so to speak, he then told his voter base to support Hillary. And the one thing that surprised me was that most of his voter base got so mad that he told them to support Hillary that they ended up going over and crossing party lines and voting for Donald Trump. And I don't think even in the history books there is anything even close to that happening. So that was something that I hope we never have to witness again, because that was just weird.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I know that anybody listening may disagree with me. I'm not going to sit here and say that everything that Trump has done has been bad. I think what we've learned is, that politicians don't generally need to be on social media because they don't always use it properly. The one thing that I've noticed within the last probably 18 to 20 months is politicians that are new to the system, they have several social media accounts. I know that obviously Donald Trump has his personal one that he uses, and I think it's the first time since a president was on Twitter that I've never seen him use the POTUS account. He always is using his personal one, and I think that is a huge problem, because I think that allows him to be a little unhinged, instead of being a little bit more controlled if he's using the POTUS account. But again, I'm getting off on a tangent. As far as Bernie Sanders goes, when it comes to he's back being involved in running for president, which I think at face value, I think it's great. I think he's got a more difficult road ahead of him this time because I don't know if his original voter base trusts him because of him originally saying, okay, I'm out, but, support Hillary. So I think a lot of his voter base feels like if he gets defeated again, he's going to say that. So I think they're a little bit sketchy. But the thing that I wanted to talk about today was recently he ended up on Fox News, which, everybody knows is very staunchly conservative. And to have a Democrat or independent on Fox News is something huge because we've never seen such an effort to cross party lines to understand the other side. And Apeshit, I know that you and I have had many a political discussion from a philosophical standpoint, but I know that you have been a huge Bernie supporter since the beginning. So I was wondering what your thoughts were, and that's why I wanted to let you take the reins.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Apeshit, and okay. So first thing, I just wanted to clarify. I looked up an article real quick on NPR. Only about 12% of Bernie supporters ended up voting for Trump in the presidential election, and which again is, I guess, a little disheartening. But yeah, we didn't all just jump on the Trump train after he, declined the nomination.
I think what was weird, I think we were just all shocked to see him go so hard against Hillary, but as soon as he lost to her, he was telling everybody to support her. I think that's why people got mad.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, because the system was stacked against him. With the Electoral College the way it is, and all the oh God, I'm at a loss for words again. All of his backers in the electorate, he could only get so many of the electoral votes, and by that time, Hillary already had most of them, and so he couldn't get any more even if he tried. And if he were listed as a third-party candidate on the ballot, it would end up drawing votes away from Hillary, and neither of them would get a majority to beat Trump. And the ultimate goal for the Democratic Party was to beat Trump. Obviously, it didn't happen. So I think Bernie was hedging his bets at the time, being like, all right, you know what? I'm going to forfeit my candidacy. If we all want to beat Trump, then you should really vote for Hillary because, again, with our stupid two-party system, we can only vote for the two, really. And because at this point, until we have like an actual ranked voting system, third parties or more have no chance. So we're kind of stuck with this shitty voting system.
Yeah.
And I think that was his mentality. He was hedging his bets. And ultimately, with the Electoral College as it works today, it didn't work out for the Democratic Party. So I think that was his mentality. So I respect him for his sacrifice, if I can say that. But in all honesty, I also felt very deflated in July of 2016.
I want to kind of gauge your input on this though. Is it a sacrifice or is it tribalism? Because I know that word has been thrown around a lot against the conservatives and the Republicans. But as far as Bernie goes, do you think it was, could it have been tribalism? Because if you look up Bernie, it says that he's an independent, but he had to run under the Democratic ticket, and then he told his voters or his supporters to vote for Hillary. So I'm wondering if it was tribalism instead of, a sacrifice, because I didn't see it as a sacrifice.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I think it was a sacrifice because of tribalism. And it's that tribalism that is the poison of our freaking political system. We have two parties that are facing off against each other, and because of that, it trickles down to the rest of the voting masses. Like, we're tribal because our leaders, our politicians are tribal. So instead of talking with each other and finding some middle ground, nope, it's very polarized, and we're at each other's throats. And again, if we have to beat Trump, then you have to side with this other giant who has the most likely chance of beating this other huge giant. So it's an unfair system all around.
Yeah. Salty, I want to get your take on this before we move to the second part of this conversation. I just want to have you weigh in on what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I kind of touched on it before we started recording, but the simple fact is, if we have it set up as a bipartisan, both sides of the coin, or whatever you want to call it, they have completely conflicting views, and that's kind of a problem because like we were talking about earlier, for one, more people are moving towards the center. I mentioned before, I'm libertarian, and I'm more around the center, maybe a little bit more left. I'd have to look into it again. But yeah, essentially, like, only having two options, I don't think that's right. And I feel like the way our country has shifted or whatever, we've kind of, the power has shifted from the people. And that's not how it's supposed to be. That's not what our founding fathers wanted. It was supposed to be an even playing ground. Government gets a section. Of course, they're broken up into three, branches, but whatever. But ultimately, the power comes from the people. And I feel like the way things are going, that's no longer the case. I won't pretend to know exactly what happened with any of the candidates, because I have a really hard time when it comes to, I guess, during the whole campaigns, because 9 times out of 10, I can't stand any of the candidates.
I agree. I completely agree.
I mean, I'm not really a people person in general, but I try to at least understand a little bit of everything. And honestly, up until the last, I guess, end of his campaign with Bernie, he was probably the closest one to me understanding. I mean, I still didn't particularly like him, but I agreed with him more on a lot of things until that last little bit. I didn't wind up voting, but it is what it is. And maybe I'm taking it back a little bit too old school, but I feel that regardless of how a leader comes to power, there has to be not only a sense of wanting to, I guess, the whole general good, of the masses or whatever. There has to be a level of morality there. And unfortunately, over the last few elections, I haven't really seen a whole lot of that from any of them. So, to me, nobody's been worthy. So,
yeah, I agree. We see a lot of tribalism in the sense that people don't want people don't want to intermingle with the other side because they're so dead set in their ways that they want their way to be, law, so to speak. They want their way to be the only way that they live, or that they think. And I think with what we saw recently with Bernie, essentially crossing party lines and holding a town hall specifically on Fox News, there was a lot of pushback from Democrats and independents because he essentially went into the lion's den. Was their frame of mind, and they started calling him, I want to say, alt-right Bernie, and a bunch of other things. But I mean, I understand tribalism to a certain degree, but how do you explain when people in your own tribe start to cannibalize you and they go after you?
Well, I think that speaks volumes of the person who's actually making the criticism. If there's someone actually venturing out, willing to go into the lion's den and to reach across the aisle, I personally think that shows true leadership, because success is not guaranteed and you're risking a lot, and that takes a lot of courage. I don't know why establishment Democrats would go so far as to, call him names or that sort of thing. I do know, probably within the Obama years, there's been an emerging split between both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So essentially you have two main parties and then like four subsets of parties in our political arena now. So for my part, I say kudos to Bernie for taking on this venture. It seems like he got a great response from the audience on multiple issues. And I don't know, I respect him more for it. And I guess for my part, I respect the other establishment Democrats who are name calling. I respect them quite a bit less.
Yeah.
Than I would have. But yeah, I don't know where this movement came from, where berating and tearing people down became the leadership style of people. I miss the old days where leaders actually inspired people to become better.
I think I don't think the three of us are that far off in age. But I mean, obviously, the very first presidential run that I saw was when Clinton ran for the first time. I was in second grade, I think, and I don't recall a lot of the debates that happened because I think they only let us watch maybe two or three of them. But once I get into like high school and Bush number 2 came into the picture, that's when I really started to understand, the difference between the party lines, where I started paying attention to all of the politically motivated commercials, and to hear these people who essentially were constituents of each other, they were just like, this wasn't even mudslinging. This was vitriolic, stabbing each other in the back just to stand on your enemy, so to speak. And if you really think about it, they were only enemies to each other on camera, because behind the scenes, they were going to each other's houses, having dinner with each other, and, shaking each other's hands. So it's like, are we the people having the wool pulled over our eyes? And if that's the case, how do we stop that? Because I I think the political system, and I'm not going to blame one singular person, but I think the political system as a whole is what has led to people being so vitriolic toward each other. I think, we see that as an example from those who are meant to lead us, and we follow that example. And I think that, the statistic that I was talking about, where it seems like more Democrats and liberals end up, deleting the people on the other side from, their friends lists or their life, essentially. I think that speaks volumes to, really parroting what we see our leaders do.
Yeah, I mean, I miss the days when politics was boring, and ultimately it should be boring. But all of a sudden, it's become this entertainment. It's become this spectacle. And then you have the likes of Fox News, CNN. They get it for the ratings. And I mean, I remember specifically, I was watching CNN one time, and Donald Trump was about to speak, all the while Bernie Sanders was giving a speech somewhere, and I forget where. But all he got was a little square in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. And for half an hour before Trump stepped on stage, they focused in on an empty podium and be like, oh man, in 25 minutes, Donald Trump is going to make his huge speech. And I'm like, it's...
And you know what? Some people would interpret that as favoritism toward Trump, but the reality of it is they wanted to cannibalize him. Like, they wanted him as the center focus so that they could cannibalize him and just jump on everything he said. Now, I don't know specifically which instance you're talking about, so I can't speak to, what he said in that address, but I think that has been, like you said, I think that's been the normal approach, is to do what's good for the ratings instead of what's good for the flow of information.
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of it. News, it seems nowadays, rarely gives you information. It just gives you hype and, spectacle, and
it sensationalizes everything. And
yes,
I think we need, and I don't know if this is a word, I think we need less sensationalization in this world, because I think we are sensationalizing things that should not be sensationalized.
Yes, but also the vast majority of humans love this stuff. I mean, like...
I know, we are absolute masochists, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, because I mean, NPR is struggling every 3 months for money, and then you get the likes of, CNN, and they do two news stories a day. And I'm like, ooh, that's a lot of information.
And and I was talking to somebody recently about how I've stopped watching national news like CNN, NBC. I watch the more local news because there's less of a bias when they report on things. Like, I could watch CNN report on an appearance that Trump made, and then I can watch my local news report on it. and my local news will actually report things that happened, whereas most of these bigger networks like CNN, MSNBC, and all of them, they seem to have this this view style roundtable where they're not talking about what's happening. They're giving their opinion as to what they think about the person instead of talking about the actual event or what they're doing. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, and I probably am going to get it wrong. There's a saying that says something to the effect of intelligent minds discuss events, something like intelligent minds discuss events, mediocre minds discuss
people?
No, well, it's essentially small minds discuss people. And I think if we look at that, I think news has become so small-minded because they're no longer looking for a story, they're looking for ratings.
Yeah, and what you said earlier regarding, the talking heads, we have more panelists now than we do journalists.
Yeah.
And that, I think that is really sad, because not only are these, newspapers going extinct, but you also get quality news programming that's also starting to go extinct. Mm-hmm. They fill all their time with opinions and editorials and talking heads that, if it's done well enough, you get like educated guesses, statistics, that sort of thing. But also, we need real news, because of talking heads, 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago now, everyone thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency, and they didn't. We could have used, actual journalism to inform the public. That would have been nice.
And you can speak to this as well. The thing that shocked me when Hillary didn't win, so many people automatically jumped to the narrative that anybody who didn't vote for Hillary was automatically a sexist and a misogynist. And me, having grown up in upstate New York, there was a time where Hillary was a senator in New York. And I followed her closely because I grew up as a kid with her husband as the president. I followed her very closely when she was the senator from New York. And in all honesty, I didn't like the things that she was doing. So that was one of the reasons I didn't vote for her. I think for the sake of a different perspective, I think it would be great to have a female in the office, in the Oval Office, because I think it would give us a different perspective on things. But I think it needs to be the right female. And I don't know how closely you're following who has jumped into the ring, but do you know anything about Tulsi Gabbard?
No.
One of the main things I love about her is the fact that finally in my lifetime there is somebody who and she's actually she's in the Democrat pool of nominees. But the one thing I love about her is she's former military. She was a Marine, and I believe she was a Marine. She might have been Army. All I know is that she's former military, and I love that because I don't think we've seen somebody who was in the military since Bush Sr., HW from the 80s.
Yeah.
I think he was the last one that was military, because I know Clinton wasn't. I know They said that Bush Jr. was in the Army Rangers, which I don't know if that's ever been confirmed. I know for sure Obama wasn't, and they've said it's been widely contested that Trump was a draft dodger back when he was old enough to be drafted. So I don't think I've seen somebody in the White House that is former military, and I really want that perspective in the White House, especially. And she's also one of the things I love is she's anti-interventionist. She wants to get us out of all these foreign conflicts and make sure that, you know, we're only focusing on things that concern us instead of trying to go in and do what she is referring to as regime change wars. She wants us to stop those and finally just start focusing on our own problems, because we have our own problems back here. And I think that's the first time I've heard a Democrat actually say that, because usually that comes from the other side.
Yeah, and actually I just pulled her up on Wikipedia, and actually, yeah, she sounds actually really amazing.
And she's not much older than us. Like, I think she might be your age.
Yeah, she's 38. But yeah, it looks like she served in the medical unit of the Hawaii Army National Guard in the combat zone in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, and was deployed to Kuwait from 2008 to 2009. And yeah, I have to admit, I don't think you need to be in the military to be a good leader, but I think it would definitely help to have a leader with that perspective.
Yes.
Because I think if you knew the hell of war, you wouldn't be very quick to instigate one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To become part of one. Or if we had to go to war, she would know that it was for a good reason.
Yeah.
And I think that would be one of her major assets as a leader, because I see so many people in Washington now who are just armchair warriors. They're like, oh, we'll send all the youngsters to fight this war while we just sit in our mahogany chairs and make laws and not give them any.
Count my money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I wish we had real leaders in Washington, because I think that would help.
Yeah.
But I know, for what it's worth, I do recall an instance where Bernie Sanders was also anti-interventionist, and he implored, Yemen and Iraq to kind of support themselves.
Yeah. I know that the two clips that I had you look up of him at the town hall on Fox News, I know that they are extensive in length, but one of the things that shocked me, and actually I think this is why some of his voters ended up voting, or some of his supporters ended up voting for Trump, is that there are a lot of views that he had back in 2016 that were very similar to Trump. He just had a different approach. Like, there were a lot of the same things he wanted that Trump did, but he had a different approach. And at the town hall, there was a lot of views that he was expressing that were very much in line with Donald Trump. He just had a different approach. And I think once he was defeated back in 2016, he went he kind of went rogue. And I think that's why he told everybody to vote for Hillary. I think he was deflated, like you said you were, as a voter. I think he might have been deflated because he found out why Hillary defeated him, because she had help within the committee. But it's amazing that these politicians can't listen to each other and realize that they have the same essential goals. They just have to put their ideas together to have a mix of ideas as to how to approach something, because there really isn't just one way to do something. There are several ways. And to kind of go off script a little, for me, I've never considered myself disabled or handicapped, because there's literally nothing that I'm incapable of doing. I just do things differently. Like, I have to improvise sometimes to be able to accomplish something that I want to do, just because I have to do it so differently. But it has taught me that there's no one right way to do something. So I think that if these politicians learned or even realized that there's no one right way, then they would actually start working together instead of, looking like essentially, what was that? Was it 300? No, it wasn't 300. What was it? Gladiator with Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Essentially, they would stop looking like Gladiator or the Hunger Games, and they would actually start realizing that they have the same goals. They just need to put their individual approaches together to see what can work, like what elements can work together.
Yeah, but I think what both sides are missing are transparency, like
Absolutely.
the reasons why they're
Very
making
much.
these decisions, but also none of them seem to articulate their stance on anything. I for years I've ridiculed either like both Democrats and Republicans, like your stance on gun control, like what you actually want to do, like have it be on record what the actual narrative should be, as opposed to news pundits putting words in your mouth, or people being confused on your message, or like what the hell socialism is, or what else? Other things like that. It's just that they don't go into detail to start from square one and define where they stand on the issues and why. And that's kind of been my main criticism of almost any politician. They just don't articulate their stance. They just assume everyone knows what socialism is, or what gun control entails, or, and those are the only two examples I can think of right now. But but you get the idea. Like, assume everyone is ignorant, and then use the building blocks. Use step 1, step 2, step 3, and then get to the argument. Because,
I think the phrase "ignorance is bliss." I'm sure you've heard that before.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well,
all the time.
The extension of that phrase is ignorance is only bliss to those who are ignorant. To the rest of us, it gives us a headache. And I think that stands true when it comes to realizing our politicians are ignorant as all hell.
Yeah.
And it's affecting us. Like, it's affecting the mental and emotional health of the American people.
Yeah. And the fact, like, during the 2016 campaign, the rhetoric that I heard seemed like, okay, so you have the Republicans and the Democrats, and then you have the educated and skilled workers. It seemed like each party favored one of those schools of thought. But society doesn't work that way. You need both. You need people in education, you need people with skills, and you need to work together to make a better society. But again, tribalism, one seemed to gravitate toward one party or the other. And again, I'll just say it, Democrats targeted academics, whereas the Republicans targeted skilled workers. And I'm like, come on, guys, don't polarize that sect of the community either, because we need to work together. And I just saw the country just be ripped apart on that line alone.
One of the things, and I'm hoping that this, as far as viewership goes, when people see this on YouTube, I'm hoping it doesn't cause an all-out, war of words in the comment section. the one thing that I learned, and I actually didn't even learn this in high school. The things that I've learned from actual historical documents since I've been out of high school is a stark contrast to what I actually learned in high school, because I think that there was an academic narrative that they were trying to push in school, and I really started to resent a lot of what my teachers taught me as far as history goes. One of the things that I learned once I got out of school was that the Democratic Party of the 1800s was the reason that the Klan was created. And it shocked me, because I was thinking of what the Democratic Party was when I found that out. And it didn't seem like they could have been, it didn't seem like the Democrats that I knew had the personality traits to be complicit in something like that. So I started doing a little bit more research, and if you look at some of the articles that are coming out as of late within the last couple of weeks, there are Democratic voters who are now arguing that it's wrong to be in an interracial relationship. Now, not that long ago, back when I was a kid, like a young kid, interracial relationships were still a taboo thing. And only when I was probably almost through grade school did it switch from being taboo to just, something that you commonly see. But now there are so many people who are, wanting, different sections for, whites, different sections for blacks, different sections for Asians. There's actually an article, and I'm sure you could pull it up faster than I could, where there's an Asian girl that talks about the fact that her fiance is white and she's struggling with it. And it's like, where are we going backwards? It blows my mind that, the Democrat, it's starting to make sense to me now that the Democrats were the reason that the Klan were created back in the 1800s, because I think they're going back to that mentality as far as ethnic relations go. And I'm sorry, you'll never hear me call it race relations, because human is the race that we are. And I think that people need to start using ethnic instead of racist.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with you, and that's probably part of the reason why I'm a humanist.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, like, a lot of those isms are the things that kind of like, they're like hot buttons for me. So like, racism and all that crap, that bugs the shit out of me. I'm like, no, you're seeing them and you'll be like, okay, that's a black guy. I'm like, I'm looking at him and I'm like, that's a person. Mm-hmm. Why does it matter that, their significant other is not? It should not matter.
Yeah.
Love is love.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, love is love. It should not matter whether their ethnicity matches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, our materialism stems from working with materials back when we were, furry mammals. I mean, look at squirrels.
Dude, look at me. I'm still furry.
Oh, yeah. Now that you mention it. But yeah, I mean, you seek a better shelter for safety. You seek more food to feed you and your family.
Right.
And then in the modern age, ultimately, our food, our shelter is money. Like, that's our safety net. And so we seek more and more. And if we can use our money to buy things to, I guess, raise our social status.
what is going to make us realize that in 2019, materialism has become out of control? Because, you know, you have social media influencers, like like the Kardashians. They, so many young girls want what Kim Kardashian or Beyonce has. And how do we get people to realize that materialism is poison? I understand materialism in the sense of wanting something that is necessary, but materialism has gotten to a point where I almost wonder if it should be considered a mental disorder.
Well, hoarders.
Yes.
That
oh
could
my
be...
God, my mom watches that show, and I get so disgusted watching that. Yuck.
But honestly, I hate to say it, that's a microcosm of what Earth is. Where does our garbage go when we're done with it? It goes on our own planet.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be too long if we keep up this mentality. We're going to be living an actual idiocracy where we're all living in giant landscapes of landfills.
Yep, electrolytes are what plants crave and all that stuff.
Yeah.
As long as Terry Crews is the president, I don't care. Because Terry Crews is a badass.
But yeah, it is dangerous. In modern society, with commercialism on the side of materialism, we are fed these lies that, we need the latest pairs of shoes, we need the best shirts and socks and pants and action figures and electronics and everything else.
The Ass Scratcher 5000.
Yeah.
Just to give some perspective, when I was growing up, obviously as a kid there are certain things. I think every kid has a level of ADD, like they are attracted to shiny things, kind of. So I think every kid has a level of ADD. So that's why parents and grandparents find it easier to buy things for kids for Christmas. As time went on and I got older, my grandmother would continuously ask me, what do you want for Christmas? And I got to a point when I was probably about 15, and I realized, and I told her, I'm like, Graham, I don't need anything. I was like, I want to come over and spend time with you and have dinner, but I don't need anything to open that's under the tree. It's like, it's no longer, for me, it was no longer about having material things. It was more about having experiences. And I wonder, are we, as a society, whether it's, an American society or a global society, are we too far gone to be able to reinstill that level of thinking? Or is there a way that we can go back to that where we value experiences and people over exploiting people to get things that are going to essentially, we can't take with us when we're gone, so to speak?
Yeah. Salty, go ahead. Yeah.
See, I feel like there are ways to get back to there, but at the same time, I feel like there's going to be a lot of resistance from a good majority of the people.
Yeah, because they have no desire to get back there.
I know. Honestly, I feel like some days that until we reach an epic level of a dystopia, or a literal, zombie apocalypse or whatever, I don't think those values are going to just start coming back until we get to that point, because it needs to be a culture change across the globe. And that's hard to implement. You can't just make people change overnight. So it kind of took this long for materialism to get as far as it has. Yeah. And I kind of agree, it is getting out of hand. But to kind of backpedal from that. That's going to be a little harder to do. It's a long distance.
Well, to kind of reference something we talked about earlier, and maybe to close things down, what I was saying earlier about seeing statistics come out that more people are moving toward the center when it comes to, where they lie on certain issues. They're starting to understand each other and come towards the center instead of being considered right or left. As if we continue this migration toward the middle, do you think it would be easier? I mean, it'll still. I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime, but do you think that if we still continue to move, more towards the center, do you think it'd be easier to kind of get out of these habits of being materialistic or being, hateful towards each other for the most stupidest reasons?
I think that it would definitely help. It is going to take a while, and you also got to consider that we don't have a global, we don't have a global union yet. So
and
like,
actually, the
it
internet was supposed to, fix that.
It was.
The thing,
but look
when
how
I
well
was
that
when I
worked.
was young, they said, the internet's going to bring us together, globally. It's like, I think the internet has, further divided us.
Yep. And that being said, I love having access to the information and be able to do stuff like this. So I mean, I don't have anything against the internet, but it definitely didn't not have the effect the desired effect.
No.
I think like I said, what I was kind of saying before, there's a lot of resistance, and I think with that being said, people are more likely to pull apart. But I think at least within the scope of our country, I think going towards the center over time, I think that will make things a little easier. We just got to make sure it's a consistent trend. Because
I think the more I'm sorry, what?
No, I was just gonna say, because I mean, as long as there's no like drastic influence to, I guess, contradict that, I think moving towards the center would be more likely, because then there's more like-minded people that are on the ballot instead of having two completely opposing sides. And I like 3 things this guy's saying, but the rest of it's crap, and I like 3 things from this person, but the rest of it's crap. But no, there's these other issues that nobody's even talking about. I think if we got closer to the center, or had, I guess, a third party, I think it would make things a little easier in that sense. And I think we could probably get away from materialism a little bit better, while still being able to stimulate our economy. There's ways around it, and like you said, there's actually multiple ways to do something.
Yeah,
And
I think the biggest thing that's missing is the desire to, develop an understanding, which is why I'm glad that the 3 of us started this, because, like I said, I don't know if I've said this since we've started recording, but I know I said this previously before we started, is that I realize and I recognize that we may have, because of our individual experiences, we may have completely different views on certain things. But what I love is that I think, collectively we're willing to learn from each other so that we have a better understanding.
yeah.
Yeah. And actually, okay, I hate to be the iconoclast here, but center is actually a relative term. So hypothetically, if we had, say you have the far right and the far left, they don't continue to extend at the same rate. So hypothetically, if we just had like a right and a far left, that center would move proportionally more left than to the right, or vice versa. If we had a far right and a normal left, that center would go further right. If we had an objective center, I think that would be ideal.
I mean, I don't think there's any, denying that right now there exists a very far left and a very far right. But I think that people like us, whether we consider ourselves left or right, I think we are more centrists because we're willing to have a conversation and see, what elements of our individual perspectives work together. And I think that is the definition of, what the center is. So I think that, as more people come to the center and realize that we have a lot of the same ideas, we just have different approaches, I think that we might be able to completely annihilate and get rid of this party system and just go based on, the merit of our ideas instead of, attacking each other for a difference in character.
And I'll give you, there's probably like a safety zone around the center. So wherever that exact center is, whether it's slightly off center or whatever, there is this field around that center where I think people are willing to come to that point, they can still have their beliefs, but also be open-minded and speak civilly toward people with opposite beliefs.
I just don't want things to devolve into the Hunger Games or the Purge, and I think that's where we're headed.
Well, and actually, that's a lot of those are distractions from actual problems.
Yeah.
And honestly, I guess to circle back to materialism, that is the distraction from actual problems. Although now it's becoming an actual problem because now our oceans and our land is becoming polluted. But yeah, so and to get back to materialism, there are a lot of factors counting against people of a more mature nature who actually do value time and experience with friends, family, etc., because that does not make money. Whereas stuff and Disneyland and cruises, those make money. Granted, they're still experiences and are probably of higher value than the actual market worth, but there's no way to really capitalize on spending time, game nights with friends or Christmas with the family or that sort of thing.
I don't know. From a mental and emotional health perspective, I think I would tend to disagree because I think I get more out of this than I do, having a tangible physical something in my hand like this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, same here. But again, are we the majority or are we outliers? And
I think we just have to be the most vocal and the loudest.
Yeah, and that I think what it comes down to, because in order to push a new idea, it has to be promoted the shit out of.
Yeah, gotta get mouthy.
Yeah, because otherwise you have. Just think of all the commercials, all the TV shows, all the movies, all the online ads pushing products on you. You have to fight against that. A huge system with a huge army of well-funded other people who want you to buy their stuff.
So clearly something we talked about before we started recording, size really does matter. And I think we should end it there just because that is a funny way to end it.
Oh, okay. And I will click the record button off.
And done.
Yeah.